Thank you very much. Season's greetings. Happy holidays. Why do I put a Buddha on top of my Christmas tree? That Christmas tree, that pagan symbol of life that survives in the dead of winter. I'll tell you more about that symbol on December 21st when we celebrate the solstice. At the heart of my tree, I usually put, and I did last night, I put a nativity scene. But I'll tell you more about that on December 24th when we celebrate Christmas. But why do I have a Buddha on top of my Christmas tree, especially when my grandson thinks it's just so wrong? I'll tell you why in a little while. Season's greetings, happy holidays. These are generic salutations. They're here polite ways to not offend anybody because people are celebrating so many different holidays, Hanukkah, solstice, Christmas, Kwanzaa. But this season has another holiday that we might not be as familiar with. It's the Buddhists will celebrate Bodhi Day, the day of Buddha's Enlightenment. The Prince Siddhartha Gautama left his home and family and his possessions behind at the age of 29 to discover the meaning of life, particularly its hardships. After 6 years of rigorous discipline and asceticism under the guidance of a number of spiritual teachers, he still hadn't found what he was looking for. So while traveling with a small group of fellow seekers, he went off by himself and he broke his fast. And he sat down under a tree and vowed not to arise until he understood. He sat through the week, day and night, and on the 8th morning came to realization, which founding the principles of what the world calls Buddhism. Bodhi Day is usually observed December 8th or the Sunday immediately preceding. Buddhism is practiced by around 500 million people around the world. And it's such an amazing thing, and one of the reasons I chose or worked with Minyan with the term no fences is that sense of oneness with the earth that Buddhism tries to get at. That sense that what we have and what we try to possess is really an illusion. A fence creates a square around a piece of land that gives us the illusion that while we're living, that we own it, or at least the bank owns it, and we're making payments. Buddhism began in India, but it's been largely displaced there by Hinduism, which preceded it, and Islam. And like any denomination or any religion that has denominations, it seems that no matter how noble the founder is, that disciples can seldom agree on what's the way to practice something. That the Buddha lived around the 6th century BC, and immediately his immediate writings are caught up in the Pali Canon, and these are not his writings, but the earliest texts of his writings, which were about a century later. And this is the basis of a stream of Buddhism called Theravada, which means the teaching of the elders. And this is primarily practiced in Burma and Thailand and Laos and Cambodia, Southeast Asia. And it's a type of Buddhism that relies just on these teachings, and it's mostly thought of that only the monks can get enlightenment through this, but it really pervades the whole culture through the sitting of meditation called vipassana, which is to ponder the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddhists that came here about a month ago were from a strain called Mahayana Buddhism, also known as the great wheel, and of course they call what they broke off from the little wheel. So you might hear the term Hinayana referring to the Theravadas. Oh gosh, there's too many consonants for me to keep talking like this. But the Tibetan Buddhists were a branch, and they expanded some of the teachings. They added teachings they pulled from Chinese religion. And so if any of you saw the Buddhists make the sand mandala last month, there was a goddess in the middle of it. And on one hand, Buddhism is an atheistic religion or a non-theistic religion, but culturally there are still all these stories that get interwoven in. And with Mahayana Buddhism, they really emphasize the fact that all can become the Buddha, all can have that potential. Although even within that, certain people have been venerated as having special access, such as the Dalai Lama, who is considered a reincarnation of a great bodhisattva of compassion. And then as this tradition travels through China and gets influenced by Taoism and somehow jumps the greatest fence in the world, the Great Wall of China, and gets over into Japan, there's again a meditative simplification of Zen Buddhism on one hand, which is again returns to a practice more of just sitting. So the oldest tradition, the Theravada, and one of the more recent traditions are very low in their ritual, and they're more in sitting in their meditation, whereas the Tibetan forms of Buddhism have more chanting and more dancing, and then there's still another type of Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, which reveres a particular Bodhisattva Amida. And it's kind of a legendary thing, and it's a kind of the pure archetype of Buddha. And so in that type of Buddhism, it's almost like a Western thing where you have a deity and you hope to, when you die, to get to the Pure Land or to heaven. So within Buddhism, there is such a wide strain of what is considered the religion. But it comes down to all of them, to those original teachings of Buddha. The Four Noble Truths. And the first noble truth is that life is suffering. And the second is that the suffering comes from craving. And the third is the cessation of craving will stop suffering. And the fourth, the way to stop that cessation of craving is to follow the Eightfold Path. Involves right views, right intent, right speech, right conduct, right vocation, endeavor, mindfulness, and meditation. And it's probably the Eightfold Path is probably where the denominations divide and saying, well, what is the right way to do that path? But the first three is that sense of we really get ourselves in a bundle when we try to control and to fence off things and say they are ours. That desire to possess. And trying to find a way to get beyond that can be hard. Because what we want, especially in this time of Christmas, can overwhelm who we are. That we really are conditioned. I read my paper today and I had to pull out about this much of advertising of all the things that we supposedly want and need and say that's our ultimate way to happiness and that's the way to spend ourselves out of this recession. But it's a dead end. And there's several reasons why this desire leads to suffering. The first is you might not get what you want, and you'll be disappointed. And second, you might get what you want and find that it's less than you expected, because sometimes advertisers deceive. And sometimes the perfect lover may leave the seat up or put pantyhose in the sink. And the third reason is that the human tendency to become bored. The chatty Cathy doll seems to be less an engaging conversationalist after a couple of days. And our new clothes will fall out of fashion. And lastly, we lose whatever we obtain. Everything we get in our lifetime, we lose. Toys get broken. Even if our family gathering is perfect, the next day we're at work and they've gone back to their homes. That's why I have Buddha on my Christmas tree, to remind myself to let go of desire. And what Buddhism tried to build was a middle path, because when Siddhartha left his princely wealth, he tried to say, I will not think of food, I will starve myself, I will fast, I will avoid all these behaviors and all this stuff. And what he found out was that asceticism and depriving yourself doesn't work. Because if you are not thinking about that piece of chocolate cake, the more you don't think of it and the more you resist it, it is still in control of you. So trying to find a way, a middle path where we are not controlled by wanting things or controlled by pretending that we don't. I put the Buddha on top of my Christmas tree to help me follow the 10th commandment of Christianity. I should not covet my neighbor's house, his manservant or his maidservant, his ox, his ass, his jacuzzi, his Porsche, or anything that is my neighbor's. That's a modern translation. What I'm asking is that we today accept Bodhi Day as our first Christmas gift. Perhaps this year, more than our Christmas tree can become enlightened. We may live and love in the present, rather than hope for an abundance of presents. Walking the middle path, we can avoid the whirlwind of desire and suffering. In closing, I ask you to remember the words of that great British philosopher, Sir Mick Jagger. See where expectations get you? You can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you just might find you get what you need. Happy Bodhi Day. There are many here. There are many here who have a lot more experience with Buddhism and in its practice than I do. And some of you who just may have questions, and maybe I'll point you to them for answers. But let us talk amongst ourselves.
gigantic one sheltered him. And I was thinking the other day how the wings of the angel in many paintings shelter people. And I was wondering if anyone else thought that that was sort of a primal thing, the sheltering need of how we approach angels and how, I suppose, although I'm not very well versed in it, Buddhists must see that serpent as a sheltering thing, even though it's the hard, all that stuff. It's still a sheltering thing that all of us cry out.
I think that sense of under the tree, which also has this enlightenment symbol, whether Newton ever sat under a tree and did mathematical formulas. There is that sense of being contained and being protected and having that and given that space to come up with enlightenment.
What I love the best about Buddhism is just the basic fact of the nature of suffering, and that if you stop resisting the nature of suffering, it seems to dissolve. One of the most beautiful things about the Tibetan monks was that these are men who just laugh, and are so happy and have known so suffering, but that because their suffering has not become solid or a resistance, it isn't, oh, I shouldn't suffer. It's just, of course, it's there, it's how it is. Somehow it seems to disappear.
To respond to the idea that the wings and the protection, I think there definitely is a desire that we all have to be sheltered and protected. And a big part of the message of Buddhism is that you already are. We just don't really realize that we are. We all already are protected just being in the present moment. But we spend most of our time with our attention not in the present moment, always thinking about things that happened in the past and things that we want to happen in the future. And that's really what I see meditation is about. It's a way to practice paying attention, practice really being in the present moment. And that's what I think all of the Buddhist practices are about. Just different techniques for dealing with all the different kinds of distractions and hindrances and things that get in the way and make our mind go those places.
Yeah, and just that sense of paradox that seems so much in that when I think of the protection of a cobra. Now, if I had a giant cobra behind me, I probably wouldn't feel protection. But it's that sense of we have these solid views of the way we think life is, and that we need to find ways to break out of that so that I know that what's mine is not mine, and what yours is not yours. What is all of ours.
Charlie, I just have a question. Does Buddhism, with its understanding of suffering and how it may be overcome, does it have any basis for people working for social justice? I know that Buddhists do, but how do they find the basis for it in the system that you described?
I think it's in the oneness sense of the great compassion is the response to all of this. That, the person who doesn't have as much as you is not a threat to you to take what you have. It is you yourself, and so your compassion goes out to help yourself, or that we're all part of that.
In response to that, I think one of the things, and Charlie mentioned Bodhisattvas, in Buddhism, Bodhisattvas, my understanding, are beings who have decided to continue being reincarnated until all sentient beings are released from suffering, which is the release from suffering is the central tenet of Buddhism, and the compassionate acting towards others whether they are, mice or men, or women. It is, I think, response to that. This has been very interesting to learn. I've had all sorts of random senseless thoughts, and I'd like to share just very briefly. One, and we mentioned it during the sermon, but while the song was being sung about fences and sky photographs, I've heard, and I believe it's true, that the Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure that can be seen from outer space. Talking about shelter, many people here, I'm sure, have seen statues of Buddha that have these curls on top of his head, like he's got a perm. Those curls are, in fact, snails that have gathered on his head to protect him from the sun. That's another sheltering. And again, my understanding of Buddhism, the most important teaching personally for me, is that it is not having things that cause suffering. It's the desire to have things that I don't have, or the desire to be rid of things that I do have. Being attached to other things, whether through desire or aversion, is what the cause of suffering is. And I found that in various faith practices, those I've been exposed to, if I simply try to be present in the moment and live here and now and not worry about what's going to happen next or kick myself in the head by what I did yesterday, life's pretty good. Thanks.
Let us continue on by singing hymn number 181, No Matter If You Live Far or Near.